You know, I'm not going to let a computer make a decision about my child. So what does make a good assessment? It's balance assessment. And we'll get to that a little. But first, I want to think about 3 points. You know, the US DOE's alphabet soups are failures, right? So I want to go to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide for a second. So now we think that we have No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, a decade of data. The data's in. I can't believe it. If this was Wall Street, we would have fired Arnie Duncan. We would have fired Secretary Page. We would have put Rod Page on a horse and tar and feathered him and sent them back to Texas. They would have been fired. There has never been such poor data. Our NAEP scores just came in. Our high schoolers, their scores were higher in 1992. They've been stagnant this whole time. They had one little bump during this time, and that's before they really, NCLB just was passed. It really didn't have anything to do with their little bump. But the scores have been flat. And these people have been making major changes over there in this piece. And that's not just only one there. Let's go to the next slide. So I want to look at the data. I'm a data junkie. I follow the data all the time. It's informative. But when I follow the data, I look a little deeper and I say, what's it tell me? There are some significant things I have up here. Can we ignore that NCOB has already spent nearly $1 trillion since 2002 on failed education reforms? Well, that's just me talking. But now let's look at the data. See, one thing that they did when they created NCOB, and I'm sure they wish they didn't do it, they created an impact study group where they would contract research studies on the reforms they implemented. And they had to be independent, so you couldn't work for one of the companies that were selling you a product. You couldn't work for one of the companies that were selling you a service. You had to bid on it. And these impact studies are rigorous. They are significant. They are the largest impact studies the US has ever done. So in 2008, the Reading First impact study came back to us. Now, Reading First, if you remember when Rod Page, you may not remember, but I do, came to Washington and told us, hey, doesn't matter whether you have special needs, doesn't matter if you live a life of poverty, it doesn't matter if your parents are in the house or not in the house, nothing matters. All that matters is if I can give you one of the gold Cadillac reading programs. And they picked the 5. They picked 5 that they said were guaranteed to work. Well, 6 years later, $6 billion later, the results came in. And when you look at the results for the Reading First impact study, the control group was the only group that showed progress. Now, what is a control group? That's a group you don't do nothing for. You don't do anything. You say, whatever you were doing before was okay. Do it. You know, it's almost like if it was medicine, we would be sad because we would want our child to say, please give them the medicine that you think would do better. All other groups in the Reading First study showed a decline of comprehension. That's what they showed. So this United States Department of Education, maybe they're not so smart. Now, Congress did end the Reading First. They did do that. And then, while they were doing that, we had a couple of other studies. Arnie Duncan came on board. I would say that if I was an attorney general, I'd probably be indicting Rod Page, Secretary Spelling, Secretary Duncan. I'd be on their cases. They wouldn't even, the phone would be off the hook. They would need 100 lawyers just to walk out of their houses over there. But if we look at it, when we think about the US Department of Education 2009 impact study, looked at informational text and content area literacy, which is something I have knowledge about. And what they did was they decided once again we'll pick the Golden Cadillac programs, and last time we picked all these commercial products, so we had one university-based one. That ought to be helping us, and we'll see which one's the best. Well, again, at the end of that study, they did the 5th grade for a year. They had to stop the 5th grade because at the end of the year, the same thing happened. The only group that showed growth was the control group. You have to understand, they are spending billions of dollars on these things. We're down 300,000 teachers. Where is that money? It's over here. We're closing 50 schools in Chicago. We're closing 30 schools in Philadelphia. How many schools do we have to close? I say we don't have to ask for another tax dollar. We just have to go back and get our money back and demand a refund over there. So the next year they decided, because, you know, they're thick, and Duncan decided, well, I don't get it. The reading first, it didn't, well, must have been, that was Rod Page's thing and Secretary Spelling. My thing, but the 5th grade, it should have worked. And so he said, let's do it for the 6th grade. Once again, massive study, massive reform, intervention, Stanford universities, major universities involved, schools across the nation involved, pushed to try that intervention. But this time it was the 6th grade. It must be different. Maybe those 5th graders just were just not, you know, something was wrong with that. And at the end with the 6th graders, what do you have? Control group, only group to show improvement. Secretary Arnie Duncan has never taught a child anything. We have never had a Secretary of Education who has never been a teacher, never been an educator, never been an administrator, never worked in a building before. But he was a friend of Mayor Daley's in Chicago. You know, sort of like I stayed at a Holiday Inn last night. You know, yeah, it's really, why are we putting people in charge that have no experience? You know why? Because it's a scam. And I know it. So we think about how normally, you know, it's 3 strikes and you're out, because I'm just an old Jersey boy, you know, baseball's in my blood, and you go, take 1, strike 2, strike 3, and I'm like, whoa, strike 3, they're out, whoa, race to the top, NCOB's over, yeah, let's do something different for a change. But somehow it's like, what, you get, what, Secretary Duncan, you get 4 strikes? What, no, that's T-ball. You stay up there until you get a hit? No, Mr. Duncan, this is the big leagues over here. So, and the saddest thing about this is they're playing with our money.
Our kids.
Yeah, our kids and our money. That's right. And when you look at them, when you look at the people who are leading the charge for this current education reform, and I think you have to have education reform, you can't be stagnant. But the current group of people, isn't it interesting that children don't go to public schools? Isn't it interesting that the schools that they attend, their class sizes are 10 and 12? There's tutors for everything. They go to museums all the time. They go on international trips. It seems to be wonderful. Bill Gates has never spent any time in a public school. So it's almost like me, I'm saying, well, you know, if you want to run the top, if you want to run the game, you should be in the school. I'm a public school graduate.